Continue with the series that we just started. We were at the fifth house where we mentioned it is third from the third and enables the individual to be extremely artistic and creative, solve very complex problems, and do this with a great sense of ease. Where fourth house represents happiness, fifth house represents love, and therefore things like passion, artistic, and intellectual capabilities are very much associated with such a person. Once again, since the first lord is placed in the Trikon, this is obviously a Raj Yoga, and generally auspicious outcomes come from this placement. And the example that I have given is that of an creative filmmaker or an entrepreneur who turns their hobbies into their businesses. That is, they are most likely to do things that they truly love doing. But of course, everything has a downside, and the downside here is to be a bit too passionate in life. And because the fifth house represents not just children but future in general and speculative abilities to predict the future, individuals where the sign lord gets into trouble could struggle with issues related to gambling. Next, let's focus on the sixth house. Here we will see that the first house lord is represented by number 3, and number 3 is the zodiac of Gemini. Gemini is ruled by Mercury, and Mercury here we will see is located in the sixth house. And what does sixth house represent? We know that in Hindi it is recognized as Rog, Rin, and Shatru. In other words, it represents diseases, debt, and enemies. It is the house of competition. It is the house where the individual serves. And it is most fruitful for the individuals who work in the industries related to medicine, because we just identified Rog, which means disease, Rin, which means debt, and therefore this is useful for bankers, and Shatru, which means lawyers, also do very well from this particular house. Since this is a house of competition, we will also see athletes have a strong placement here. Let's have a look at the key points. Individuals with the first lord in the sixth house are generally good in legal, medical, and corporate or banking sectors. And of course, the sixth house is obviously recognized as a Dusthan. Dusthan means a difficult spot to be in. So such an individual is likely to get into fights and battles. We must understand that the sixth house is 4 houses away from the third house, and the third house represents courage, capability to go for war, and fourth places away represents happiness. So this lord also is at its happiest when they are in the sixth house. Coming to the next one, the seventh house. Here we will see the sign lord is represented by number 9. 9 is the zodiac of Sagittarius, ruled by Jupiter, which here we will see is placed in the 7th house. And what is the 7th house? 7th house is the house of business partnerships. It is the house of intimacy. It is the house of pad prapti, that means getting recognized. So such an individual whose first lord is in the 7th house will likely focus on relationships and partnerships, and their lives revolve around that intimate circle of business and personal relationships. Such individuals are likely to have or find success in marriage, and such individuals likely to grow significantly after their marriage or after finding stability in relationships. But of course, the downside is such an individual could be dependent on other people. That is, how they feel impacts how this person feels. And this impact is quite significant, which is directly proportional to the distance that Lord has from the Ascendant, as we have discussed. Next, the 8th Lord. Here we will see that the first house is represented by the number 10, which is the zodiac of Capricorn, the lord of which is Saturn, and we will note that Saturn is in the 8th house. The 8th house represents deep secrets, the ability to research, the ability to acquire knowledge which is difficult to comprehend for by most. Obviously, once you gain knowledge, you structurally transform. And therefore, great scientists are often seen with this Lord in the 8th house. 8th house also represents longevity of life. So, when the first Lord goes in the 8th house, or the 8th Lord goes in the first house, it creates the possibility that the individual could create life changing transformative work which will be recognized long after the individual is gone. A strong 8th house can give immortality, a long life to the physical body, and an even longer life to the work done by that body. But it is, of the three Dusthans, 6, 8, and 12, it is the toughest. And that's largely got to do with the sudden ups and downs. Therefore, often you will see that this house is also associated with stock traders. Why is that? Because 5th house particularly represents speculation, and this Lord of speculation is at its happiest when it is 4 places away. Consequently, such individuals could find a great interest in speculating. Therefore, the example that I have given is that of a stock trader. Also, astrologers, psychologists, healers, other occult practitioners are all associated with professions related to the 8th house. 8th house represents everything that is found beneath the earth and above the sky. So things such as metals, gemstones are elements found below the earth, and technology are elements found above the sky, your internet, etc. So such individuals could also take up careers in those lines. But the downside, this is in general the toughest house of any chart, and the downside is that such an individual could face many ups and downs in their life, the severity of which is in direct proportion to the strength of that Lord. Next, the 9th house. Here we will see that the ruling Lord is Taurus. Taurus is ruled by Venus, and Venus is 9 places away. Once again, we can see that the Lord of the Kendra on Trikon is in the Trikon, giving the individual another Rajyog. This is in general an auspicious placement because the 9th house represents good fortune in this life, or the good fortune that is going to come in the future. Once again, the 5th house represents fortune that is accumulated due to previous karma, and 5 places away is the 9th house, which is the fortune accumulated due to current karma. And therefore, actions in this house make the individual luckier, more spiritual, and the individual finds great success with teachers and mentors, and in developing a strong philosophy of life. Let us see. The 9th house is the house of dharma or higher knowledge. Individuals with the first Lord in the 9th house can be obviously teachers, because the 9th house in general is associated with Sagittarius, and the Lord of which is Jupiter, who is a guru or a teacher. And by travel here, it is largely represented either for academic purposes or spirituality, but mostly for religious learnings. And a classic example of the first Lord being in the 9th house is going to be of an individual who simply quits doing what they do not like in order to truly explore their surroundings and get a greater sense of life. That is, through their actions, they are looking to experience a lot of meaning in life. What are the downsides of this? The downside is that such an individual could be too idealistic, because we know the 1, 5 and 9 houses represent dharma purusharths, which means the sense of duty. Such an individual could be too idealistic and therefore may lose sight of practicality. Then we have the 10th house. Here we will see that the first Lord is Saturn, placed in the 10th house of name, fame, duty, and recognition. So here I have marked the keywords as career and ambition. Individuals who have the first Lord in their 10th house work related matters become the dominant theme of their life. Getting respect in the industry they work in becomes the dominant theme of their life. They are highly career focused and generally have a very, very strong work ethic. The downside is that such an individual could ignore the personal life and therefore struggle with the work life balance. So, much like the first lord in the 6th house, the first lord in the 10th house also, which is of course a Raj Yoga, but it can also make the individual a workaholic. Next, the first lord in the 11th house. Once again, we have a Capricorn ascendant, and we can see that Saturn here is conjunct with Venus in the 11th house. And obviously, whenever we are doing that, you will always note the distance in degrees. Like I said, that 12 degrees is the ascendant, 25 degrees is Saturn, the distance between them is 13 degrees, which obviously is the planet has got less strength in such a case. So we will have to measure it in that context. So here we will see that the 11th house represents gains and social influence. So obviously, if the first lord is placed in the 11th house, such an individual is likely to gain a lot in terms of networks, in terms of community, in terms of wealth even. That's largely because the default 11th house is that of Aquarius, and we know that it's the air sign which connects with people at a wide scale. So therefore, they are your entrepreneurs who could actually employ hundreds of people, build complicated processes which serve many people. And in general, they will find themselves in presence of good company, that is affluent company. Once again, where the 3rd house represents your friends, 9 places away is the 11th house, which represents friends who are exceptionally lucky and have reached a very high position in life, the Jupiter position in life. Of course, the downside of being in such a social house is that the individual could prioritize social validation significantly. And in the context, because we are in the 11th house, which we know from Dharma, Arth, Kam, Moksha, is in the Kam Purusharth. So everything now here is related to relationships, where the 3rd house is representing social relationships, 7th house is representing close and intimate formal relationships. The 11th house represents those formal relationships which are not yet partnerships. They are simply your networks which can get you to places without any legal binding. It is just one of those people who can make a phone call and get things done, or look at getting things done. Finally, we will look at the first lord in the 12th house. Just one more point on the first lord in the 11th house. 2nd and 11th houses represent wealth of a chart. So once again, individuals who are there in the 2nd and the 11th house, money becomes a core form of identity for them. Finally, once again, we have a Capricorn ascendant, and here we will see Saturn is in the 12th house. The 12th house actually represents spirituality and isolation at a later stage in life, that is after 35, 40, and at a younger stage in life could represent materialistic pleasures. Or maybe it could represent materialistic pleasures right up till the planet which is ruling that house gets matured. In this case, it is Saturn, so therefore I use the number 36. But in general, the 12th house represents spending and consuming. And why would an individual consume? An individual would generally consume to enhance their quality of life. When an individual's first lord is present in the 12th house, they have a great sense of spending. They are experts at spending money. We also know that it is only through spending that you can create assets. So if this first lord goes and gets favorably placed, such an individual could create significant assets and gain a lot from them. The other aspects related with the 12th house is that of isolation and foreign settlement. Individuals with this presence are also looking to move outside of wherever it is they are staying, and are likely to find great success in businesses related to imports and exports. The 12th house is obviously the moksha purusharth, in which in the end of all of it, the individual is working for peace and happiness. And therefore, the example that I have given is that of individuals who seek enlightenment and work for charity. Though for a significant part of life, they will be working, if at all, for consumptions. But once they gain surplus money, they are looking to spend it to enhance quality of life. Initially, it is for themselves, later on, it could be for society. And here, an example that I could think of is an individual who leaves their job in the current country to either start a non-profit organization or a non-government organization in the country or abroad. The downside of this is that the first lord is that the presence of the first lord in the 12th house, in the house of actually Pisces, which is basically the house of infinite wisdom but no direction. In that house, the individual could really be disconnected from reality. Of the three dusthanas, 6, 8 and 12, I think this is the second toughest, but one could argue if even 6 is a tough house. So it is definitely easier than the 8th house, but it is in general considered to be a dusthan, and individuals with this placement should obviously be careful about where they spend. This house also represents bed pleasures, and it could either cause loss of sleep or a loss of intimacy in life. And you know it, your first lord is happy if it is there, is if you're getting a good deal of both of them. So with that, I just want to have a quick recap that of course we discussed combinations where the first lord is creating Raj Yog or Dhan Yog, that is Raj Yog if it is present in any of the Kendra or Trikon, and Dhan Yog if it is present in the 2nd and the 11th houses. The other 4 houses, which is 3, 6, 8 and 12, are generally considered the tougher houses for the first lord to go and be present, but there are serious exceptions to all of them. The idea of this exercise is to teach you how to assess where your first lord is, and that with that we can start the process of analyzing Vedic Jyotish. Once you have done where your first lord is, I encourage you to mention it in the comments of where your first lord is placed, and if possible add a couple of lines about what is your experience with the placement of the first lord. Once you have done that exercise of where the first lord is from the ascendant, you will then have to repeat that same exercise with the moon and the sun. So taking the chart right in front of us, if I make the Chandra Lagna, that is the moon as the first lord, where that is the house in which moon is present as the first lord, and there are reasons for this which I will explain in later videos. Moon and sun are really important in a kundli. Here you will note that this individual also shows the combination of the first lord, that is Venus for the ruler of Taurus, in the 2nd house. You would agree? So once again, this individual here is the ascendant, that is if I place the ascendant in the 1st house, what are the combinations? First lord in the 12th house. If I put moon in the 1st house, then the combination is first lord in the 2nd house. And if I put sun in the 1st house, you will note that the first lord is in the 11th house. So what are the combinations? The first lord is in the 12th, 2nd and 11th. Of these we will see that 2 is for wealth, dhanvani kutum, that means challenges and efforts will be in that direction. 11th is networking with people of affluent influences, and 12 of course is to be isolated and perhaps settle abroad. With this you might be able to draw a slightly better conclusion or assessment of your chart. And when you couple that with the distance between the planet and the ascendant, for example, in this chart we will see that the ascendant is 7 degrees and Saturn is 27 degrees, right, which is 10 degrees away, because the maximum distance is 30 in a particular house, which is 10 degrees away, which makes this Saturn a little weak. So the case that we discussed, first lord in the 12th, is a little weak. The next thing is the ascendant is 7 and moon is 28. Similar is the case with moon, that is Saturn 27 and moon is 28. So here also the ascendant lord is a little weak, because the distance between the ascendant lord is that of 9 degrees. So it has just about borderline moderate strength. That is the combination of so I beg your pardon, not from moon. In this case, it will be from Venus, because moon is in the house of Venus. So this combination becomes strong because Venus is at 5 degrees and ascendant is at 7 degrees. So the first lord in the second house from the moon chart, that is, I'll put this again here. First, so we will see this here again. First lord of the moon chart is Venus, which is at 5 degrees. Ascendant is at 7 degrees. The distance is at 2 degrees. So of the combinations that we have discussed, this combination is the strongest. That is, the individual's life focus would be in the second house, the case that we have discussed in the first part of the video. I encourage you to do this exercise with your ascendant, sun and moon. Do share your do take the time to check the distance in degrees. Do share your comments so that others who watch the video in the future could learn from it. I wish you all the best. Thank you.